afternoon. I will call to order this hybrid, very hybrid, public meeting of the Clark County Commission on Aging. It is January 18th, 2023, and my name is Cass Friedland. I'm chair of the Commission. I would like to warmly welcome everyone joining us today in person, online, and on the phone to the Commission's first public workshop on the Aging Readiness Plan Update Project. This workshop is taking place in the Commission's regular meeting slot this month. The Commission has been excitedly anticipating this public workshop for almost a year, and today is the first of several opportunities for community members to help us collaboratively update the Aging Readiness Plan, which was adopted by Clark County 10 years ago. The existing plan, which includes 5 chapters, was developed by a task force of 24 members with significant public input. But a great deal has changed since 2012, and the original plan, frankly, needs a refresh. So with your input today, and with the help of our consultants at DUDEC, who you will meet soon, we will be able to update the extraordinary founding document with the addition of a 6th chapter focusing on emergency preparedness, a topic that is not currently covered. This will include a discussion of natural and man-made hazards and lessons we've learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, certainly not something we thought of in 2012, as well as revised data and maps and the inclusion of new technologies and services. Before I go on, I would like to have Franklin Johnson, our Commission Vice Chair, come on up and add a little bit more meat to the 6th chapter. Franklin?
Thank you, Cass. I want to echo Cass's welcome to all of the people participating here in person, online, and on the phone. This is a very special opportunity for us, and we wanted to thank you in particular because taking your time and your commitment to add to this. Without your participation, we won't be able to have the plan, the best plan that we hope to get, so we really appreciate this. Think of this as your plan, please. The COVID-19 pandemic taught us a lot of lessons, and the most significant one is that we need to be prepared in the event of another such opportunity, and I'm saying that in positive. We want to be able to better respond and take care of our community in the instance of another emergency, be it man-made or otherwise. So your input is critical to us, and we plan to keep you posted on our progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Franklin. Well, today you will be asked to share your thoughts and ideas on 18 strategies. There's 24 boards around here, but these are part of 91 overall strategies that are in the plan. These 18 have been selected for discussion today because of their importance to members of focus groups that were held in November of last year. And our consultants would like to dive a little bit more deeply into them. But if you would like to share your thoughts about something that you do not see on these boards, remember these are just a small number of a larger number that are currently in the plan. We do want to hear from you. So you're going to see places here where you're going to be able to write your ideas on a Post-it and put them in these places that might not necessarily fit the other boards. Please, we do want to hear from you on those. In a few moments, Rose Newberry from DUDEC will tell you more about the workshop structure. But first, before we get started, I'd like to introduce a few people in the room and online. If you are a commission member in the room or online, if you could raise your hand so others know who you are. Wonderful, thank you. And staff, for our record, could you please note that we have a quorum of commission members with us today. And we also have a number of county staff and staff from the consulting firm DUDEC here this evening. Could you all raise your hands in the room and online so that folks know who you are as well? Wonderful, thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Rose Newberry, who is the project manager with the consulting firm Dudek. Rose and her team were hired to help the commission with this project, and Rose will be providing the introductory presentation this evening. Rose.
Thank you, Cass, and thank you for having me. I think we're actually going to skip introductions since we did that pretty well, and we'll go to the next slide. So it's going to give you some background on the project. And so like Cass said, the original plan was approved in 2012 from community input and continuing collaborative development. The 2012 plan included 5 chapters: living healthier and longer, housing opportunities, transportation and mobility, supporting your health, well-being, and independence, and turning silver into gold. Like Cass said, we're adding a 6th chapter, the safety and hazards chapter, and those are reflected on this handout you may have gotten at the front of the room, and they're color-coded, and then those relate to the board. The plan includes 91 strategies that we're revisiting this round, and we're looking at 18 in deep dive today. Next slide. So I also want to talk about how the Age Readiness Plan is implemented. This is a really unique plan that focuses county-wide, so that incorporates the county, multiple cities, and the one town. So the ARP highlights regional best practices recommended for local jurisdictions. So that's a really good idea that Vancouver, Valley Run, or Camas can implement in their cities. It also sets standards for community involvement and monitoring, and then it connects planning and advocacy together, as well as service providers. So a lot of it's both county and cities, but also ADSWA and other service providers that directly interact with older adults. So there's a lot of players that implement the ARP. Next slide. So thinking about the update, I think Cass did a really good overview, but it's to overview that again, really need to overview natural and human-caused hazards, so wildfires, respiratory illnesses, also what we learned from the COVID pandemic, both respiratory illnesses, but also how services are provided now. A lot of services have changed to delivery or to virtual, which can reduce drive time and transportation needs, but also increase loneliness. So it's really reflecting on the last 5 years. And just major changes in housing, transportation, and healthcare, such as new options for housing and transportation, ride shares, additional ADUs, accessory dwelling units, or granny flats have come on the market a lot more, and then also changes to Medicare and the Affordable Care Act. There's also a much larger generation of people reaching retirement age right now. Older adults is a very diverse group in age, ethnicity, and needs. We want to address that in this plan, and then also to monitor progress. When I'm back here in 10 years, I want to understand if the plan was implemented correctly or where maybe there were missteps. So making sure that we have good metrics to understand if we're doing it right. Next slide. Okay, next one. We'll talk about the purpose and kind of the orientation today. So why we're talking today is for additional feedback on these strategies. So these are the ones that come from focus groups or are from the 2012 plan that maybe we want a little bit more understanding about. So we're aiming, and this again is on your handout, to understand 4 key things. Who these strategies are for. Again, older adults is a diverse group. What kinds of seniors think are best served by these strategies? Where they should be implemented. This could be in a certain city, or this could be near schools, near housing. Thinking a little more geographically about where these are important to be prioritized. When they should be implemented, right now, after a disaster, those sorts of things. And then lastly, why the strategy is important to you. And maybe it isn't, and if it's not, you can write that, or you can skip. We have lots of strategies to go over tonight. Next slide. And this is where we are in the planning process. So you can see we've already held stakeholder interviews and focus group meetings, and now we're hoping to get feedback from you as we evaluate the strategies and come up with a new list of strategies for the updated plan. After this meeting in April, we'll have a prioritization meeting, so understanding of the strategies we have left, which ones are the most important that we should prioritize, and then a draft plan early this summer. Next slide. And then some logistics are the last topic. So as you can see, there is a board showing this is what you'll interact with both online or in person, and it has the strategy up top. So that's the topic we're talking about. The who box, where, when, and why. If you are in person, you will write on your sticky note as clearly as you can and post it in the box you are talking about. If you are online, you will just tell your facilitator which box you are talking about, or you can put it in your chat message. As you can see on the side of the panel there, or in your handout, we have those 6 categories: transportation in blue, supportive services in more of a light blue, safety in red, housing in orange, healthy communities in green, and community engagement in purple. Next slide. All right, and then here are all of the instructions for everyone that I will give. So if you are in person, you can walk to each topic station and use your handout as a guide if there's anywhere you want to go through first. Review the policies. Use as many Stokie notes as you would like to comment on those boards. If you can move clockwise, that would help, but we're not too busy in the room. I think we can avoid traffic jams. And again, skip boards, use the additional feedback boards as necessary. If you're not seeing something on a board that you really want to talk about, please put those on the additional feedback boards. And then supplies and handouts are available in the hall, and I can show you where those are. If you are online, you will be automatically assigned a breakout group. You can inform your facilitator if you have specific interest you want to talk about first. You can provide your comments verbally or in the chat. And the facilitator will switch your boards for you, as you won't be walking around in a room. And then if you have any additional comments that aren't addressed in the boards, you can add those to the chat or just tell your facilitator. With that, we'll get started.
All right. So I am going to pull up our boards, and then from there we will sort of have a discussion and be able to get all of your comments on different strategies that we just went over. And so is there a topic out of some of those initial topics that is most interesting to the folks that are online? And I will go over what those initial topics are again. Transportation, community engagement, healthy communities, housing, safety, and supportive services. So if there are any that anyone is especially interested in, feel free to shout it out or type it in the chat, and we can start with that.
I am interested in healthy communities. Ann Foster.
All right. Yeah, and we'll get around to all of the strategies. So start with healthy communities. And you're all able to see this screen now. Awesome. So the first strategy is provide safe, accessible public facilities such as commons, parks, community gardens, and other social gathering spaces, especially near a concentration of older adults' homes. So if any of you have comments on this strategy and specifically who you might think should be prioritized for certain aspects of it, or sometimes it's easiest to start with the why. Why is this strategy important? But feel free to message in the chat or just begin to speak out as things go.
Questions? Sorry. So Henry, this is the current definition of the strategy, right? So this is the way the strategy reads right now for community health.
This is one of the strategies currently, yes. So
for community health, or am I saying that right?
Yeah, for one of the healthy communities strategies. There are a few that we will go through.
Okay, so there are a few. So if I don't see availability of food on this one, it may be in another one coming. right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll make a quick comment about the why. So if we're under the can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, and I hope that my volume's not killing everybody's ears.
You're okay.
So the why under healthy communities, as I look at the statement, provide safe, accessible public facilities as common parks. Loneliness is a big problem within our older population and even our younger population, though it is less defined with our younger population. I would say that healthier communities are communities that have ways to gather. So that is one of your whys, is addressing loneliness, addressing despair, bringing people together, and in a way that is welcoming. And I am not sure if I'm supposed to be typing this out or what.
No, yeah. We have some scribes in the background that are helping with that. So you'll see your comment added onto the board as we go. And then we got a comment in the chat as well from Christina for the why. And it says that I feel this strategy strongly supports aging in place by addressing life enrichment as well as essentials such as access to food. And social isolation as a key to healthy communities as well. All right. I think that makes sense for the why. And is there any details specific to the where or the when potentially? If there are any places in the county that come to mind that could be improved or are a good example of this at this time?
This is Amy Gross. I want to say something about where. It says in your strategy, especially near a concentration of older adults' homes. Does that mean that the focus is on 55 plus communities or an area where there are a lot of retirement facilities, or question mark?
Yeah, and I think that that's something that, we can try to drill down a little bit more on here too. Is that definition of it something that you have an opinion on, or think that a certain definition there would be best for it?
Well, because I'm very self-centered, I want to say that my husband and I are older adults who don't live near a lot of older adults. We're in a community with a lot of golden retrievers and children on bicycles. So I'm just thinking that wouldn't be included in this.
Yeah, that makes sense in the way that it's written right now. It doesn't necessarily provide that. Do you think that it could potentially be beneficial to you to have places be more accessible around you, or have sort of some of these places more specifically called out throughout the county potentially? I think that in general, probably the first is the one that makes more sense to me.
I have a question for Amy. This is Carol Becker. Amy, I was wondering if the people who live not in communities where they can get together would like to be able to do more Zoom. It's not as socially, heart filling, but it is a connection.
I don't really have an answer to that. I spend half my life on Zoom, but because of events like this, volunteer activities in my life that have virtual options. I know in my community, there are bingo games that people go to, and there are wonderful parks. So I don't really have an answer for you. I'm sorry.
I'd like to make a comment to your question, Carol, if I may. I do think Zoom is a fantastic, though less ideal alternative, and really offering people the ability to meet when they want, how they want, wherever they are. Because really the goal is just to really to build that connection. So I think it's something that I often think about Zoom now tied to COVID or some sort of a pandemic or a health crisis. We can turn it into something positive, right? Like this moment right now, I can see you pretty darn clearly. And I think that we can interact really, well, virtually or in person. So I definitely think on the where, we should add in those Zooms, and on the when, I would add in Zoom anytime, anywhere. So if you're a night owl and you want to meet at midnight or 1 a.m., I'm not that person. But there are others out there. Maybe that's an option that we should have for folks who are lonely in that moment. So,
The other thing, Tanya, that's good. I was thinking that some of our older people who didn't grow up with computers would like to do this, but don't know how or don't have the equipment. I think some places, libraries provide training. I don't know about equipment.
To your point, I think we're missing a category of how. So just throwing it out there,
that's our job to figure out as well.
Okay.
But yeah. All right. Are there any other comments on this before we move on? We have I think 16 or 17 strategies to go through. So
I do want to make a comment on who, if I can, really fast. And sorry, because I'm going to have to leave early because I have to go to a work meeting. But for the who, I don't want to limit ourselves to thinking about only older adults. The beautiful, vision that I've always had in my heart is that there's some level of connection with either schools or younger folks in making those connections and gaining the wisdom from their older adults and brethren around their where they live. So I just want to throw that out there, that we don't forget about that opportunity to make those really wonderful connections.
Now that's great, because I have seen that library, I forget where in the world it is, where old people are there to be a storyteller about their life, and the kids can come and join, and other people can come and join.
Yeah. And being a recipient of just going back to Italy, where my dad was born, and hearing all of the stories when he was a little baby, little toddler, running around in Italy, that it is such a gift that my children were able to share, and I was able to learn. And so I will double and triple down on that one.
thank you. All right. We'll move to the next healthy communities strategy, which is encourage volunteerism and age-friendly best practices for businesses and volunteer events.
I work for Hope Dementia Support, a program of CDM. We need more facilitators for people with dementia and their caregivers. And we need more daycare, although the people who have to go to daycare don't like calling it that, for adults, so that the caregivers can have some respite and the people with dementia can have some fun.
right. Any other whys on this, maybe to start us off, related to best practices for businesses and volunteer events? And Grant, were you able to get that first one?
I would just add to Tanya's feedback about the opportunity for intergenerational interaction. I think so often we think about how we need to support older adults, but I would also want us to really look at opportunities of how we celebrate older adults. They provide a rich base of volunteerism, and just making sure that folks have information about meaningful opportunities to volunteer, and that as community we celebrate the volunteer efforts of our older adults.
I like that.
Thank you, Christina.
Volunteer efforts.
This is Barbara. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you, Barbara.
E.M. Raymond. I am just overwhelmed with opportunities to volunteer. There's your church, your HOA, if you belong to one, all of the agencies, the food banks. A lot depends on your physical fitness, but there's so many short-term and long-term opportunities to volunteer. It just, you can't possibly.
No, I'm finding nothing's too loud for me.
So yeah, I never run out of opportunities to volunteer.
I think for those of us that do volunteer on a regular basis, of why is we can express in terms of our own stimulation and metabolism, if you will, activity level, interest, social, the reward on a social basis. I think that's I think we could all agree that that's a why that makes us as healthy as we possibly can be at our age. It's challenging for me. I've got neighbors who are in our age group and who say they want to volunteer and they've been thinking about volunteering, and gosh, how do I find, if for some reason there seems to be some kind of a barrier between thinking in turn, this is something I want to do, and actually getting there. There's no easy path towards finding that ideal volunteer slot. Senior Messenger is filled with opportunities. To I think it was Cheryl's point, Barbara's point, one of them. There's volunteer opportunities, but taking that leap almost requires somebody holding your hand. It's almost like getting a first job.
Well, I think one of the hows would be one of those public service announcements on the TV station. We have it for all kinds of things. How about on volunteerism, so they know where to go to, or a telephone number to call when they want to volunteer. Sometimes they don't know where to start.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think Carol brought up a point earlier as well, just the technology, some technology challenges. I know that when I had about a year off from being in the workforce, I immediately went to volunteermatch.org, I think, or .com, and tried to find volunteer opportunities in my area. It was kind of a nightmare. It did not work well for me. I was inundated, and I'm like, these are not good fits for me at all. So I think that that core finding a path for a more coordinated and more targeted effort might be nice.
Hi, this is Sue. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say that I've lived here now 4 years and I can't find places to connect to volunteer. It's not something that's even in the paper. I mean, it's not easily accessible. is what I would say. And I've got a friend that feels the same way. She's lived here about 4 years too, and looking for opportunities to volunteer. There doesn't seem to be anything where you're told, hey, or where you look for that. So I don't know.
So this is Barbara. You might just start with your neighbors. You know, that there's certainly elderly in the neighborhood that might need help with shopping or.
Oh, I know. I was just in that condition.
Right.
So I'm very aware of that.
or your church, and then also look at your innate abilities. Are you artistic? Are you more task oriented? You know, what are your preferences, and stick with that, because that makes it easier. Maybe you prefer volunteering at the library or in
but I don't know that they take
daycare centers to read to the, you know, the young ones. There are just so many places that need volunteers.
Thank you all. And yeah, it seems like coordination, just like Tanya has written in the chat, is, you know, the biggest issue here. And so there's opportunities out there, and so how can we better coordinate those opportunities?
One thing, Clark County Newcomers Club would be a place to start.
And they're looking for leaders at Marshall Center and Furstenberg Center to lead like games, card games and things like that. And you have to be willing to make a phone call.
You need to know who to call.
Well, you just Google it, you know, Google the Marshall Center, Google the library.
Oh yeah, I'm very aware of that. But you said something about newcomers, something?
Yes, there is a Clark County Newcomers Club, and they meet. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't remember where, but.
Well, I can Google that.
Yes, and I think they meet at lunch or breakfast. I forget one of those.
Okay.
Someplace, and I was told about that when I first moved here, but I haven't gotten over there yet, so it's my own fault.
Because you're busy volunteering.
Awesome. All right. Well, from here, we'll move on to the next healthy communities strategy. This one is promote local, state, and federal programs to increase access to healthy food options, which was brought up earlier, including farmers markets in areas lacking them.
Yeah, there's that farm off of 78th Street. They look for volunteers occasionally for picking carrots and things when they're ripe. I forget what that farm is called.
Heritage Farm.
Yeah, Heritage Farm.
Yeah, that particular plot at Heritage Farm is managed by the food bank. So if interested in doing that, you'd work through the food bank on doing that. That's their plot. So one of my volunteer activities is managing a farmer's market. And it's not, the challenge is not finding customers, the challenge is finding farmers. So when I bring up local food as an issue, I'm actually sort of speaking in terms of how we continue to produce local food, especially given the increasing barriers such as pandemics and climate change, pending bridge breakdowns, traffic jams. How do we ensure that our local population, and this is everybody, not just the aging, has access to something to eat? Our farmland is disappearing rapidly due to development. There's a lot of public policy that could be discussed on this topic, which we don't need to go into now. But I guess my point is that I feel strongly enough about access, having growing local food locally, producing it locally, getting access to that food is just as important, according to Maslow, as is housing and shelter. And we just can't forget that.
Yeah, I think they could have a few more of those community farms like the one at Marshall Center.
Yeah,
Where,
community gardens.
You take over, yeah, community gardens. Mhm.
I agree.
Maybe
You
we
know,
And
could
those are great volunteer opportunities because they're all
Right.
run by volunteers. You know?
maybe we could encourage someone to promote that.
So I'll make a quick comment. I think these are such a great conversation. I put a couple of thoughts in the chat on this as well. To your point, and the land is dwindling on availability to farm. So how do we get creative and innovative on making sure that there is adequate food supply wherever we are? And I know they're getting really creative in some inner city areas. We're not an inner city. I get that. Like, there's downtown Vancouver, which is a part of our, our space here. But even within communities, I know I am the brownest of brown thumbs around. And but I have got a little bit of spot that I could help grow food, and I would love to learn. So maybe there's an opportunity there where we connect food, healthy whole foods, where we live, in our neighborhoods, and then and like teaching each other how to kind of take this and create fresh whole foods that are available to others, but not coming out of a massive farm. I don't have a massive farm.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Our church has a community farm where the produce gets donated to, I think it's the Knights of Columbus, and then gets distributed to the needy.
Yeah, Grant, maybe if you can add into the WHO section, just education on farming options locally and what you're able to farm yourself. Also in the chat, Carol messaged about potentially growing additional food at home that could be contributed to the food bank, and so that is another potential idea as well.
And the food bank's a great option, but it's not the easiest to get to for people that don't have easy transportation or that work and can't meet food bank's hours. So one of the things that we've been looking at on the Food System Council has been what are alternatives to a food bank on a neighborhood basis or a neighborhood association basis, for example, something that is central to and easily accessible transportation wise. Again, it's challenging to always find the food, especially locally grown food these days, but with demand that encourages and nurtures local farmers to increase what they grow. So hopefully there's a little bit of a spiral that we can create here. The more that we ask for it, the more that they can grow. They're not going to grow enough if in fact there's no demand for it. But to the point of the food bank, we have to start looking at smaller versions of food banks all over the county.
Sure. Yeah, so Grant, maybe neighborhood scale food banks is a good way to put that, and put that in the where section.
Right.
This is Amy Gross. I just want to also add that food safety is a concern. I mean, I know that with my green thumb, I grow wonderful produce and it's grown in all the right ways, but I don't know that somebody else isn't pouring pesticides on their food and calling it organic. And, there needs to be,
Yeah.
I think the health of public health has, they inspect restaurants, they have issues, they have input about that. But I think it's just important to know that if we grow more food, it has to be distributed safely.
That's a great point. All right. Any other comments on that?
When would be year round? That's the other. You think that our food prices are high now as a result of the rain in California. Wait till we see what produce is going to be in the grocery stores in the next month, So we have to take into consideration the seasonality of food, learning to eat what's available seasonably and grows indigenously.
And take care of our hens so we get some fair priced eggs.
Yep.
So Grant, if you can add the year round to the when, I'm going to move on to the next strategy. Oh, well, we're on to the next category. I saw that someone was interested in safety, so I'm going to skip over to safety and we can come back to these. We also have 45 minutes left at this point, but I think we're doing all right. So, support vulnerable populations during response to hazards. So this is a pretty broad strategy. People can take it and run with it in whatever way that you're interested in. One thing that could be a pretty easy who is, who are these vulnerable populations that we're talking about? Or are there certain areas in the county that response to a certain hazard might be especially important?
I would think North County, the rural areas is basically what I'm thinking of, where there are vulnerable populations in rural areas. They may be less able to hear warnings and alerts and be on a path that's where response teams are traveling.
And vulnerable populations are also recent immigrants who may or may not speak English, but who have come from a country where hazards that they have known responses to are war, different than a blackout for 5 hours in Vancouver, although I thought that was a hazard. That's all.
So in my area near Hazeldale, along Highway 99, there's a lack of sidewalks all the way along Highway 99. And our neighborhood association was able to get the county to install some more sidewalks, but I've seen more and more people in wheelchairs. And I even saw one lady in a electric wheelchair pushing a stroller along that miserable sidewalk area. And there just isn't enough attention, I think. Fortunately, we've been getting more curb cuts, but we still need more sidewalks, good sidewalks that are smooth and uninterrupted.
Okay. And that may be covered under the transportation section, but we will take that note.
I
We can
guess
move
the
on.
same would go for covered bus stops. And we have very few of them in Vancouver. And I've tried to work with C-Tran to get more. Every time they open up public comment, I always add it. They have brought in more with the Vine facility, but there's so many bus stops where, especially in the lower income areas, where people have to wait in the rain for a bus. And with small children, it just seems so unfair. And they've expanded their routes and their schedule, but they haven't added more bus stops. So that's probably under your transportation thing too.
Yeah, 100%. It is. I'll go on to the next one here. This is offer older adults specific alerts and communication channels. Maybe that's a good one to start with the why. Is this something that would be beneficial and why?
Well, I belong to ARP, and if you have a computer, they will send you anything you want to know, anything you want to do. So that's a good resource for learning about what's happening at the government level and federal level and in your local communities.
Yeah, and to clarify, I think on this one too, it's mostly going to be related to the communication that you get during hazard events. So is there, any gaps in that communication currently, or?
But whoever is not talking, mute their phones, please.
So would you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. So for this strategy, it's offer older adults specific alerts and communication channels, and that's sort of related to hazards or emergency events, I think.
Okay, well, CRESA has a sign up area online where you can get alerts on your cell phones. And I think that includes not only they have one for the elderly, they have one for children, I forget what they're called. And I think they have one for weather alerts.
Could you spell that? Is it CRESSA?
Just one S. It's the Columbia River Emergency something or other. It's our 9/11 office, 911 office. It's downtown Vancouver.
Additionally, we do have silver alerts. And then I would say that there's probably benefit to making sure there's good coordination between community-based organizations that are already serving very vulnerable populations. So for example, coordination with Meals on Wheels, coordination with the Area Agency on Aging, with CRESA. And some of that work is already underway, but I think just having a formal plan that talks and addresses about how does that look and how does it operationalize.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and definitely is something that, within this plan with those agencies listed as potential partners specifically, that can be
and
good starting
maybe
point.
that could be built into the Meals on Wheels, which are delivered to these seniors. That's an excellent chain of communication, because you have to meet and greet these people at the door to collect their meals. And you could insert some alerts or give them verbal alerts about pending weather issues or power outages.
Great. All right.
That could also be managed through friendly chats, which is part of Meals on Wheels.
Yes.
Okay. And then the next one is considering access to healthcare during hazards. So with
Never
this,
heard of it.
so what are some healthcare considerations that, could come up as issues during response to hazards? I'd say the main things that this might be getting at is, related to if energy outages occur or if evacuations are needed. Are
Severe
there any
weather.
Yeah, as a result of severe weather or something else that would cause you to evacuate, like a fire? Are there things within the healthcare existing healthcare in the county that could be activated or be used?
I'm not aware of it. Red Cross would be probably the most likely because of their blood, the need for blood. They have those announcements on TV occasionally, but yeah, if the news channels aren't saying it, I don't think anybody gets it unless they, discuss it with their doctors beforehand.
Coordinating with news channels.
Yeah, one of the things that Red Cross does is when you prepare your emergency kits, they warn you to have extra prescriptions available. So
Last year, we had a presentation by fire department and the Red Cross in terms of how they help people prepare for emergencies. And the fire department said specifically, most of the emergencies they're called out on, I guess this would be the not fire, but paramedics, are older people living alone without any support and having needs. And that really the training for that, meaning the preparing for that, helping neighbors know who's in that situation, helping people in apartment houses know who in their building might be in need. I think those are important things.
Understanding who needs the help.
Yeah,
in the moment of an emergency.
Yeah.
So maybe some pre-planning there.
Right.
There are some senior facilities, for low-income seniors. I think it's the Knights of the Pythias or something have a place downtown, but I don't know who supports those seniors there, but it behooves you and your neighbor to keep in touch, because who knows when you're going to need help too. But if you see your neighbors that are alone like that and have a handicap or are frail, you need to reach out to them. At least just touch base and say, are you doing okay? Is there anything we can do for you?
Yeah, so neighbor to neighbor programming of some kind as well could be added to that too. All right. Let's see. Here is this neighborhood and neighbor to neighbor programs. So this is expand neighborhood associations to include neighbor to neighbor programs. And I think kind of understanding the why on this and developing sort of an understanding of what neighbor to neighbor programs are most beneficial or maybe are not around currently that you'd like to see in the future could be helpful.
Well, I think the neighborhood associations, some of them have deteriorated drastically. They've cut back on the mailings that the city is willing to pay for, the county is willing to pay for. And so instead of getting information about what's happening in your neighborhood, it's full of jokes and quips and but there is a page on who to contact with contact information in the newsletter. So that's available, but very little else.
Okay.
Clark County Sheriff Department puts out a publication called SALT that includes that kind of information, what's going on and where and how to get help.
SALT.
The communication is called SALT, SALT.
Right.
And I get that in my email every month.
There's also the neighbor watch, or I forget what it's called, precinct by precinct. You can get emails through that also. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that.
Okay.
I don't think neighborhood associations necessarily deteriorated. I do think many of them became inactive as a result of the pandemic. Those that relied upon or featured face-to-face interaction, or however that looked, maybe it was a regular meeting or small meetings or something like that, of course, had to discontinue those. That's sort of what happened in our neighborhood. Was it, you know, we sort of dwindled down because we weren't able to have live meetings. Yes, the county did, and cities, I can't speak for cities, but I do know that yes, the county did pull back on its budget for supporting newsletters. And that's a great loss.
Right.
That would be a great lobby, something to lobby for from us as a group, is to you know, up that particular piece of the budget that would enable more frequent newsletters, fuller newsletters. Now it's down to just, in our case, in the county,
2
for
pages.
county,
Yeah.
it's just a card.
Oh my.
Yeah. And I remember, so we rely upon volunteers. Neighborhood association is another great opportunity for volunteering, by the way.
Right.
But we relied upon volunteers to hand out the newsletters, which were 4 to 6 pages long in the pre-pandemic days, actually the pre-budget cut days, sorry. And I do know that so many of the residents, when I'd hand them the newsletter, they were thrilled to get it. I mean,
Right.
it was an important, you know, it was a meaningful thing for them, and we worked at making it meaningful. Again, volunteer based. So here's another place where volunteers could be used, or yes, I feel pretty strongly about neighborhood associations. I've never heard of this concept of neighbor to neighbor programs. We've never used that in our neighborhood association.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's in place of just, yeah, ways to connect people, and it could be for a variety of reasons, social interactions potentially, or yeah, I mean, like we were talking on the last policy related to healthcare and you know, knowing your neighbors' situations to be able to assist them, and that type of thing too could be
Right.
so. But okay, I can move on if there's no other thoughts on this one. One thing, Grant, if you could put volunteers in the who category on this one.
They're really dependent upon volunteers.
Dependent on volunteers.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. We will move on to another category. We have supportive services and housing. So, and transportation. So there's 3 left. Is there any of them specifically that anyone is interested in or prioritizes?
Senior housing. This isn't necessarily senior housing, but I have noticed, looks like some tiny houses are going in on the corner of St. John's and 88th Street. Is anybody familiar with a new development there?
Doesn't look like it on the call, but if you have any ideas on that or opinions on that, feel free to voice them. The strategy we're looking at right now too is promote more affordable multi-generational housing. So
I would just like to chime in regarding affordable. When we look at rent control or the lack thereof, I know our office saw a significant increase in calls from older adults because of their rent increases, and it placed some of them in a situation where they were no longer able to meet all of their expenses.
It's become a big problem all over.
yeah, so that why is, rent increases causing basic needs to not be met.
So I think
What-
at the
what's what
county
I-
or at the county or city level, they need to pass some probably at the state level, some legislation regarding the amount of rent that can be increased. The percentage, there should be a ceiling, much like they've done in Oregon.
Well, we need to be sensitive to the people that own those properties and what's maybe causing them to need to raise their rents.
I agree, Carol, but I know in some cases we saw and heard about, increases as high as 20%. And when you're thinking about some folks who may be on a limited income, that it was just too much for them to absorb. And so I agree there's a balance.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I guess kind of speaking to the slide that's up, with more affordable housing, the Housing Authority is building, another building specific for aging adults called Laurel Manor that will hopefully open up in, I don't remember the specific timeline, I think sometime in 2024. And the hope is in the long run to use adjacent land to build family housing and create a multi-generational model, with that housing development.
That sounds great. Thank you.
There is kind of some wild thing. A long time ago when I was very, very poor, I found in Arizona, I found an old garage that had been turned into a studio apartment. So perhaps some tax advantage could be given to people that do something like that.
Incentives for ADUs and that type of housing. For the who and the where, are there any, it's from what I've heard so far, it seems like everyone everywhere, and that makes sense. Everyone everywhere obviously needs affordable housing. So if there's any other thoughts on that.
Well, I think having like a mother-in-law shed or garage renovation is a zoning issue. And I think that needs to be done at the county and city
Right.
level.
Correct.
Okay. So Grant, maybe in the when box, you can put local zoning incentives, and then in the next to that as well in the when is, state level legislation or advocacy.
I do think that when it comes to affordability, a lot of work has to be done. I don't know where this would go, Henry, so this is just a comment. I think a lot of work has to be done with the development community, developers,
Mhm.
because that's where the pushback is.
Well, I understand that, but also the county needs to hire more inspectors. Because right now we're throwing up so many apartments, and it's hard for me to believe that they're all really being well inspected. And I've heard for years that the number of inspectors has been short. And now that we're in a development era, I think the county needs to increase the staffing in that area to make sure that what gets built is going to be safe.
Okay,
And-
so in the
and
who
it's
category, considering developers and including developers in the conversation, and then also in the who category, looking at county staffing needs.
to keep up with the development.
Sure.
Well, it's really, it's more, they're gonna, the county will have to work with the developers and incent them, because they're not gonna do it on their own.
No.
And so far, there isn't a plan, at least that we've been aware of, that actually envisions areas where affordable housing could work best in the county, or various areas where affordable housing could work best. And then work with specific developers who might feel that they can meet the strict requirements in just that area, as opposed to sort of a blanket, we need more affordable housing, we need more affordable housing, because that's not working. I mean, we're seeing that.
Well,
When affordable is something in the range of, 600,000, I think we're working from two different dictionaries, so.
Well, the city is adding affordable housing in the Fourth Plain area, that new development area along Fourth Plain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're also including some affordable rents, I guess, down by the waterfront in the new apartments that they're putting in down there. I think I read that somewhere.
Wow.
So they're thinking about it, but it could be stronger and it could be more. And
right. And that's also, and Barbara, that's also city.
Yes, city.
So
needed in the county too.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing that's always bothered me about this subject is who defines affordable?
Right.
And
right.
based on what?
Yeah. And then in a matter of years, it can change as well.
I mean, I think at least in the Housing Authority, HUD, is the one who determines what the affordable rents are, and it's based on the area median income.
And I think, we're doing a really good job on like utilities, help with you paying your utilities, and help with your property taxes. So I don't know if everybody's taking advantage of that can take advantage of it, but I was very impressed with the state in that area.
That's interesting, because I pulled that form up And it was so confusing, and I didn't know whether I qualified or not and how to fill it out. Is there
just-
somewhere I could go to get some
Yeah.
help with that?
Yeah, I've called them and talked to them. You can call them.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And this is the other housing question. We're getting a little bit tight on time at this point. So this
I
one
thi-
is related to locating senior housing within a half mile of transit, services, and retail.
Yeah, I think they're trying to do a better job of that with the Vine and the CTRAN thing. I think planners are looking at this more now because of the overload of traffic on this that's increasing, trying to keep people where they live instead of having to drive long distances. So I think just to encourage the planners to continue thinking about that whenever they approve new development.
Well, I want to say I've seen a really good example of how that really has worked. One of our support groups has a gentleman who's blind and he's caring for a blind wife. And he has to use CTRAN to get to our meetings and to get back home. And it seems to work really well for him. So yay for that.
Yeah. Also, one thing that they did in Portland was they put housing above commercial units. So you would have some retail services at the street level and then housing above that. And I don't know if our zoning allows that, but it seems like down by the waterfront, that's what's happening. I'm not quite sure. But if we could encourage more of that. And that's a zoning issue.
Yeah. Yeah, encouraging mixed use development. That would be in the where. Okay, we're running tight on time. So if anyone thinks of something for this, feel free to type it in the chat. But I'm going to keep on moving onto the supportive services section. Encourage and support collaboration between organizations to better use existing facilities and reduce the need to travel for services.
Not sure what that means.
Right, me neither.
Yeah. So thinking about that, it's looking at collaboration across organizations with facilities. So are there opportunities to share facilities potentially for organizations that have similar functions? And I would say, how is it related to travel as well? So
the only thing I can think of is the long, independent care facilities where they have gyms and pools and shuttles. But I can't think of any other organization that would both have housing and services.
Well, I would like to just give a shout out to one of our community partners, Vancouver Housing Authority, with Bridgeview Resource Center. I think that's a really great opportunity or example of how there's housing and then there's a resource center that's there where organizations and community can come together to access services. It might mean a case manager using one of the interview rooms to meet with a client, so a client doesn't have to figure out transportation from home to that particular agency. It might mean a community resource fair where numerous organizations come together for the residents of that community to access services. at one time. So I think they've been really creative in how they've programmed that space. It includes like a computer lab there. There's several meeting spaces. There's a room that's very inviting for maybe a little more informal type of venue. So I think that has been really well done. And I'm starting to see a couple other examples of that in community. I think Peace Health is also developing something similar, and it's at the hospital. So I think if the more we can do that and then actually coordinate organizations to bring services, I think that would be helpful.
Regarding the VHA, is that the one off of Andreessen?
It is off of Andreessen.
Yeah,
It's
they've got
next to
a
the
Boys and Girls Club there.
Exactly.
It's really a great area.
Yeah, it's accessible. It's near public transit. So I think it was well thought out when it was developed and built.
Right.
And I can say, just with other areas of the housing authority, this isn't necessarily for, the community at large, but, for folks who are living in some of our affordable housing properties. We've partnered with the county to provide COVID vaccination clinics at our properties. And a lot of people expressed that they appreciated not having to travel to a clinic or a pharmacy to receive that, and also fish. The food pantry has been a great partner in bringing their mobile food pantry directly to some of our properties. And so, probably the onus is on us to, be actively seeking out those community partnerships. But I can say we definitely appreciate any opportunity to bring services to our residents.
Yeah, Furstenberg, when they put the library in there, that turned into a good center for services too.
Could we get something like that in North County?
Oh boy, I would love that. I wondered, Henry, if anybody has done any research on best practices in other areas that would be a good model to follow or adopt.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, I mean, a large part of the update is considering, what types of options are out there, but you have to kind of mold these strategies for Clark County specifically too. So, and certain cities may have programs that are working really well for them, that might not be the same success in another place as well. So to kind of consider the aspects of, what type of infrastructure is there. But
I
yeah.
know we have some neighborhoods that close off a street for street parties sometimes in the summer. And I don't know if that's something you have to ask a request for from the county, or you do. But that brings neighbors together too.
Awesome. We can take note of that for the other slide. This next one is encourage and promote diverse communication services through language and cultural competency guidance.
Yeah, I think I worked through the community college to tutor some, let's see, English as second language immigrants. I don't think our community college does anything like that though here.
Considering the local schools and community college, that could be included in the WHO category.
Some of the middle schools focus on that. I'm not sure about the grade schools. They do have some Spanish immersion programs, but
And is this something that you think could be expanded as far as communication services that are maybe lacking in certain areas? It could be with businesses or with potentially transportation service providers, or
I do see more publications with, or flyers with multiple languages on them, which is good. But if someone is shy about their English, it really takes somebody that's willing to do a one-on-one with them. And that's a good area to volunteer in also.
right, I'll move on to the next. And we've got, looks like about 5 minutes left as well. So this one is encourage the development of a geriatric mobile healthcare outreach program. So mobile healthcare outreach, is that something that, is of need in the county?
Well, the only experience I have with that was with the vaccination. When that first came out, the state had a mobile healthcare outreach program. And I was able to get them to go to the home of a couple of 90-year-old couple who, and one was disabled, and they were able to vaccinate that couple right there in their home. So yeah, I think there's definitely a need for that.
Yeah, especially as our baby boom generation is getting into those older years.
I wonder
And
if
Gen X is also.
there might be two opportunities here. One that is almost more of a concierge type of healthcare delivery system for those individuals who just prefer to have care at home. And then also one where it might be that you've got a fragile senior, so for them to leave their home and get to their healthcare provider, it's one, very rigorous, and two, puts them at risk. And so being able to bring care to them in a way that is more cost effective, for example, them going by ambulance.
Yeah, it's
Excellent idea.
It's a big idea, and it's going to take a lot of money and good people to work it.
I agree. We do
A lot
have
of risks.
Yeah, we do have the beginnings of some types of program like that. Clark Cowlitz Fire and Rescue has begun to deliver some programming like that. It's not, as comprehensive as we might be able to grow something like this into, but it definitely is meeting a need. I'd love to see more of it happen.
Right.
My cat loves her mobile vet.
Yeah.
Right. And then, let's see, this is not sure that we're going to get to the transportation ones, but we could move over to those right now instead of finishing this, if you'd like.
For the technology, isn't the library doing a program helping people learn how to use computers? I think the library system is doing that.
Okay. All right, I'll move over to the transportation so we can hit all of these. And I know one that we talked about earlier was continuing to add shelters, benches, and seats, landing pads, and other amenities to transit stops.
Yeah.
As funds are available.
Well, not just as funds are available, but as a high priority, because it's never been a priority in Vancouver.
Is Vancouver the main issue area that comes to mind for you?
The C-Trans system.
The C-Trans system for the where?
Yeah.
And then the when would be high priority.
Yes. I would remove that wording as funds are available. I think it just needs to be a period after transit stops.
Okay. And are there any amenities specifically that are either called out here or not called out that should be added?
I think the shelter with seats or benches.
All right. I'll move to one of these other transportation policies. This one is improving existing neighborhood walkability and allowing easier, accessible pedestrian connections to parks, schools, transit stops, retail centers, medical facilities, and public facilities. So this one also gets at the
sidewalk on Highway 99.
All right, well, we'll get those comments added in there, and we definitely appreciate all the time that you've all taken today, and I think this will be a great help to all of the policy development that we'll be working on, and we're excited to share the draft of the update in the future. And also there will be an opportunity online to provide additional feedback. There were a couple of policies that we didn't quite get to, and so if you want to look at those,